Hi everyone, hope you all are doing great. Today I'm going to review the book The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So, this book was published in September 2020, and I just got to know about this book from one of my closest friends from Ravensa University. Thank you, Achyut, if you're watching this video. There have been many books about money. Some like Rich Dad Poor Dad spoke about the virtue of investment and the virtue of assets, how to grow money by investing in assets and reducing the liabilities. And also there have been some books like The Richest Man in Babylon, which also uh, told a similar story, which told the same thing in a by weaving a beautiful story. It is a very short book. This book speaks about the old principles, the virtue of saving, the power of compounding, and how all the old school investors grew their wealth in leaps and bounds by following the same principles. So, this 248 page book has 20 chapters, and each one have a gem of uh, nugget of learnings and also real life examples which are interwoven so beautifully that it makes a great read. So I'm just going to skim through the chapters. The first chapter is No One is Crazy. So this speaks about people from different generations raised by different parents who earned different incomes and held different values. And so basically that in different parts of world and different economies, they have different experiences, and while growing up, some may have grown up in a recession, or some may have grown in a boom. So it all shaped their understanding of investing and saving in different measures. The second chapter is about risk and luck. So here it speaks about the luck and risk. If one gives luck and risk their proper respect, they will realize then that when judging people's financial success, both the good and the bad is never as good or as bad as it seems. Here it gives a classic example, a beautiful example of Bill Gates and Kent. So Bill Gates was one in a million of students who got in a university at the right time. He was in the right place at the right time, and so was Kent. They had this grand idea, as well as one of the co-founders in Microsoft, who is no more now. So they had this grand idea of making a computer that is so advanced. But what happened is Kent died in a mountain accident, in a mountaineering accident. So while Bill Gates was one extreme, was one example of how luck favored him, Kent was on the other extreme, how the risk was great, because the risk of meeting a mountain accident was one in a million, and he was the unlucky one that day, who that year in fact, who made his fate as brutally as he did. So the third is about never enough. How some people, they think that they don't have enough things with them, and what drive them to do the crazy things. So modern capitalism is good at two things. One is generating wealth and generating envy. So um, that's the reason perhaps why some people they don't have the feel of having enough, and how they just go to do they just uh, go about doing riskier things, which entails risk to their lives, to their reputation, as well as to their family. um, and the fourth one is about confounding compounding, and which speaks about the magic of compounding. So here it says that Warren Buffett, whose net worth is more than $95 billion, has his 95% of wealth after he crossed 65. So such is the power of compounding. He started early. He started at the age of 11. Yeah, at the age of 11, and went on doing that things for about 4 decades, and it is going to be about 5. So the fifth is about getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. How getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But the thing is, uh, having money is one thing. Having money out of a riskier bet or risk full of risk investment is one thing, but sustaining that is what is important. So the sixth point is tells you win. It speaks about uh, one can go wrong in half of the time and still make a fortune. For example, Netflix. Um, Netflix had its many of its projects scrapped. At the same time, the CEO Reed Hastings told the team of copywriters to do new things, not to worry about the things that got cancelled or scrapped, because um, that is bound to happen in creative field. Also, the example of Amazon Fire Phone, which was $1 million, the investment was wasted, but still it was. Also Calco, a Hollywood production company, who after giving some hit movies went on to give a series of flops. So a small minority of things account for the majority of outcomes. Only a minority of investments or a minority of work uh, will in, will amount to a majority of the success. But that does not mean that one will give up, because half of the things may and will go wrong. The seventh point is about freedom, which is about controlling the time is the highest dividend that money pays. Um, the highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want to do today. The eighth chapter is about it is man in the car paradox. So it speaks about how a man inside a car, um, he thinks that, well, he has this car and he is successful, he has arrived, but people who see him, they don't think so. Instead, the people who see him think that if I had that car, people will think I am cool. So here, the person in that car is not respected or is admired as he thinks. Rather, it is the object that is respected and is admired. But if a person wants to be truly admired and respected, that person has to be humble and kind. So that will go a long way in generating a feeling of admiration and respect. Uh, so the ninth chapter is wealth is what you don't see. So the wealth is the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the watches not worn, and the clothes foregone, and the first class upgrade declined. So wealth is the financial assets that haven't yet been converted into the stuff that one sees. 10th chapter is about saving money, because people's savings and frugality are parts of the money equation that are more in one's control and have a 100% chance of being as effective in the future as they are today. Of course, money's value depreciates as the time passes on, but still there is a virtue of saving. The rainy day one has never seen, or one uncertain event can happen any time. So even the most lucrative of investments may go wrong, but not the savings. And it also speaks about less ego, more wealth. How saving money is a gap between one's ego and the income, and the wealth is what one does not see. The 11th chapter is about choosing to be reasonable than being rational. So here, this chapter is a bit of I could not get uh, what the author wants to say in this chapter. Of course, I could sense here he says that one has to be reasonable than being rational at the extremist side. So suppose one has invested in a company um, that he or she does not um, have an interest. Suppose one has invested in a company that he is so much invested in the people, the team, the technology, or the vision, mission, anything. So if the company goes bad, the person is going to hold on to the investment, and rather than moving anywhere else. But if one does not care about the company, just that person wants the return. So if the company does bad, he or she can easily move on to other things. So here I could not get it because at the surface level it does seems good to be rational. But anyway, surprise, the 12th chapter. So here it says that history can be misleading, the past trends can be misleading, as a new event can appear, and basically it says that one cannot predict the future by studying the past. 13th chapter is room for error. One always have to have room for error, because the gap between what can happen in the future and what does happen is different. Many a times it has happened like that. 14th chapter is you will change. People do change, and so does their situations, everything. So one has to be flexible in terms of having investments in those areas. 15th chapter is nothing is free. Everything has a price, but not all the prices appear on the label. And the same goes with investing, where volatility is almost always a fee and not a fine. Market returns are never free and never will be. They demand that the investor pays a price like any other product. 16th chapter is you and me. Here the author says that we are different from each other. So be aware of taking financial cues from people who are playing a different game than you are. So investors, they have their own reasons to invest. They have their own goals. For a retiring person, for a person who looks forward to retiring, the investment goal can be vastly different from a person who is looking at short term investments to purchase short term assets or things. So here one has to be careful. 17 is the seduction of pessimism. Here the author says that optimism is the best bet for most people, because the world tends to get better for most people most of the time. But pessimism holds a special place in our hearts, because it is not just more common than optimism, it also sounds smarter, it is intellectually captivating. So here the author says that one also has to see the flip side of the coin. Rather than being rosy about the future, one has to also have the eventualities. One has to consider the eventualities that can happen in the future. 18 is when you will believe anything. So here the author says that the more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimates the odds of it being true. Second is everyone has an incomplete view of the world, but we form a complete narrative to fill in the gaps. So he tells that not to take everything in the face value, and not to believe everything and anything that we see or hear. And 19 is all together now. This is a summary of all the the above 18 chapters. So the key takeaways have been summarized and compiled in one page. And 20 is the confessions. Here, the author confesses about his family and his life, what happened in the past. So, his father, who was a who rose from poverty to become one of the top doctors, um, just one day he just left the profession like that, and so he needed a change, and fortunately he had that savings uh, to make the change in his life, and they lived below their means. They lived so frugally, so it didn't take much of time to adjust in their new lives, since the job, the respect, and the position of being one of the most top doctors in the US. So this is a book review, and this is a book which I enjoyed a lot, and I hope that anyone who is looking forward to reading this will enjoy. Though the ideas are a bit old school, nevertheless, it is a great read.